This is a HeadGum podcast.
Hello. This is Fake the Nation, where we do a bonus pod dedicated to The Godfather. Folks, let me explain why The Godfather. Besides it being a cinematic classic, I've had a conversation about this movie with maybe like somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 35 female friends. It comes up as a movie that men quote and revere, and then they desperately want you to watch it. And I have dated all of those men. And then I have complained about... That's right. It is all of them. And I've had a conversation with literally like 35 of my friends about this phenomenon. And I couldn't say for sure if I had seen the movie. Or if I had just heard every man I ever knew explain it to me verbally. Mm-hmm. So I felt like it was high time for me, Negin Farsad, to formally watch the film and to weigh in on whether or not every man I dated needed to talk to me about this film. So that's the sort of overarching question that we'll answer at the end of the podcast. Did every man I know needed to talk about this? And to do all of that, you've heard their voices already. I am joined by two wonderful panelists. Now, the first is actually, somewhere in the range of like between 10 and 15, like of the conversations I've had about this movie, where we have dated men who talk about this movie, and we both hadn't seen the movie, right? We both hadn't seen the movie. Danielle?
I saw it in undergrad over 20 years ago.
Okay, right. So you saw it in a not formal way, and because you didn't have a podcast,
it sounds like. I saw it in a trailer with 3 of my buddies. You saw it in overgrad.
Undergrad. Don't give me too much credit.
And then but then the funny thing about the conversation with Danielle was like, the two of us were like, oh yeah, we should definitely do do this on podcast form, and then literally 3 weeks after we had that conversation, the movie Barbie comes out, where they parodied the entire idea of men always talking about The Godfather. So this was not just something for me and Danielle and my 35 friends. This is like all of womanhood, right?
Correct.
And it was so beautifully lambasted in this movie, which we'll play a clip from that in a bit. So joining us, we have the wonderful, she's a visual artist, she's a filmmaker. Her latest project is The Sabbath Queen, which you can find on her website. It is the one and only Danielle Durchslag. Hey, Danielle.
Hey, Negin, thanks for having me. It's a really rare treat to discuss a family more dysfunctional than my own. So I'm thrilled to be here.
I know, so exciting. And we'll talk about whether or not that family is dysfunctional. That's like, I think at the base a question. Now, last time I was on one of the tours I did over the summer, this next gentleman whose voice you heard about overgrad,
I don't know how college works. I told you I watched Godfather in a trailer.
Somehow The Godfather came up on the tour bus, as it's known to do. And of course, I said to Corey, I want to do a pod. And he said, I absolutely want to be a part of that pod. And so, of course, he is the second panelist. He's a comedian. He's a writer. He's just one of my favorite people to watch live on stage. My God, you should definitely do that in your life. Make it a part of your bucket list. He writes for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And you can see so much of his works at welovecorey.com. So I implore you to go to that website. It is the excellent Corey Ryan Forrester. Hey, Corey.
Hey, how are you? I would love it if my family, on the other hand, was as normal as this family. That would be great. Financially stable, have dinner together, There's a
lot of family togetherness. Yeah, no, I mean, hell. Now, listen, before we get into it, I just want to remind listeners that if you like what we do on this show, on the regular Fake the Nation, and with these bonus pods, please go to patreon.com/Negin Farsad, and you can support the show for as little as $4 a month. You can get bonus episodes of the show. For as little as $1 a month, you can get nothing except for the knowledge that you support the show. And then there's tiers above that. So go to patreon.com/Negin Farsad. And thank you so much to everyone who has done that. You guys are the best. Now, I want to play, as a way to get into it, the clip that sums up the reason this podcast is now existing is the clip from the movie Barbie. Andrew, take it away.
You can tell them that you've never seen The Godfather and that you'd love them to explain it to you.
Ooh, are you guys watching The Godfather?
The Godfather.
I've never seen it.
Oh my God, you've never seen The Godfather? This movie is a rich blend of Coppola's aesthetic genius and a triumph of Robert Evans and the architecture of the 70s studio system.
Can you start the movie over and just talk through the whole thing?
I had totally forgotten that scene. I think I forgot that scene because when I saw it in Barbie, I was like, "Yeah, that's how that should go."
You're like, what's the joke here?
Yeah,
what is the joke here?
Didn't stick out at all.
And then can I tell you guys
for learning?
So when I watch this movie this weekend, I learned two things. One, I had never seen this movie. Okay, it was like because I didn't know if I had seen it. Why didn't I not know? Because I'd heard about every fucking scene in the movie my whole life. This movie is a part of the American firmament. I think there are people like me out there confused about whether or not they've seen it because it's just everywhere. It's constantly referenced. I have written jokes that reference The Godfather, having never seen it. And so that's one thing I learned about myself. And then the second thing I learned is that my husband is every man in America because I started to play the movie and then literally he goes, "Can you pause it for a second? I'm just going to explain something to you." And then he literally told me like tidbits and and stuff that he thought I should like really take from the scene. and I had never seen him behave like this. This was like a thing comes over men. And my husband, Danielle knows he's a feminist. Okay.
Absolutely.
Our daughter has my last name. But what I'm saying is the feminist men have their blind spots. And the Godfather, he could not control himself. I paused many times so that he could get whatever he needed off of his chest.
Maybe The Godfather created patriarchy. It sounds like it. If you watch it, you're just in it.
Now it's let me explain this from the male point of view in terms of how I think it's actually, but I'm just saying in terms of how I think it's actually kind of sweet. And I'm only saying this to defend myself because I'm so guilty of this. I want so desperately for my wife to enjoy a thing the exact same way I enjoy it.
Right.
You know what I mean? I do. Right. I really do.
No, I see that. Yeah.
And she's not as into movies as me. Now she's like starting to get that way because she's sweet and she has seen like, oh, this is something that's really important to Corey. Like he really likes it. So like, if you're a dude that's just on a second date with a girl and you do this, you're trash. Okay, but if you're doing it with your wife, there's a deeper thing there because like I'm not kidding. Whenever I get to like used to when me and my wife first started dating and I found out that she hadn't seen a movie that I think should be in the zeitgeist of everyone's brain, I would be like, "Are you shitting me? What?" And now I get excited. I'm like, "Yes, you've never seen it. Tremendous. I can show it to you in my own special way with my pop-up video edits for you that I have learned through my many years of watching this film and studying it."
Yeah. No, and it's funny because I know like, there's like a Cool Hand Luke in my future. There's a Dog Day Afternoon in my future with very much the same pausing and explaining. Like, because I know he's talked about these movies. These are the movies that make men use the pause feature.
Can I just say it's also Serpico.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Serpico. Fucking Serpico. Yes.
What are the odds that I was a film studies major. I've had more men talk at me about Godfather than humanly possible. What are the odds that the only two films they wanted to talk about both starred Al Pacino and women don't speak in them?
Yes.
I was about to
yeah. And we'll get into that.
Back when movies were movies, kid. We had it made.
Oh, this just 2 weeks after the election. All right.
Okay.
We're back, baby. I hate him. For anyone that doesn't know me, I hope he dies.
No.
Yeah.
Definitely. You're on the right side.
The nation knows. The nation knows. Folks, let's talk first about the basic story, which in watching it, it's funny because one of the things that like my husband really wanted me to take away from is that it is a succession story, but it's not a succession story in the way we know, like by the way, the three of us did a Succession recap pod. I don't remember which episode, but the three of us did literally talk about a Succession story. And to me, that feels like such a clear Succession story because the sons are and the daughter are vying for a thing. Now here, it's like it all sort of happened accidentally that it ended up in the right son's hands or something.
Well, it's Henry V. Not to be this guy, but it's Henry V.
Yeah, okay.
It's literally.
By the way, Corey, that sounds very undergrad. You're doing there.
Thank
It
you.
is.
But I mean,
also overgrad.
Which
Yeah.
it's funny. Yes, overgrad as well. It's funny because before we did this, coincidentally, I watched The King, which I actually didn't know was about Henry V. I just knew it was called The King. There've been a lot of those guys, so it could have been any of them. I was just like, this is The King. I like medieval stuff. It's on Netflix. And I watched it, and as I was watching, I was like, "Oh, this is a Henry V." And I was like, this is kind of like Godfather in a sense. Like the person it was supposed to go to doesn't, except for Henry IV was hated, and Marlon Brando's Don Vito Corleone was sort of revered. So a little twist on that, but
Right. And I mean, so what did you think about that Succession aspect, Danielle, with the sons?
I'm still metabolizing the idea that this could be a functional family. I'm really working with that in my mind because when murder is the family business, I don't know if functional is on the table. Personal view. But, when you think
Danielle, you're being very controversial here.
I'm here to make a statement. Thank you. It is a Succession film. Whether or not it is a tragic Succession film, I think depends a lot on how you're approaching the movie. Famously, Coppola saw this film as an indictment of America. And that's why we have things like, what's the first line in the movie? I believe in America, right? And he saw it as like a condemnation of all the excesses and violence of our country. But for a lot of people, it just makes mobsters feel really glamorous. So I think how you view Michael ending up in the chair is partly about how you view the point of the film. For me, I think it's a tragic succession. I was rooting for Michael to go back to whatever he was doing before.
Yeah, he was wearing a nice little military outfit.
Hero.
He could have become a finance bro. Well, even the dad says, I wanted you to be Governor Corleone.
Right.
So
in that way, I think it is a tragic story. It is a Succession story, but what we also know is he's not only going to get the power, he's also going to get more murder. Because in this family, they're the same.
The other thing that I was struck by, in viewing it as a Succession story, is I sort of didn't realize how little Marlon Brando was in the movie. Ultimately,
it's kind of
crazy. He's not in the movie as much as you. From someone who heard about the movie my whole fucking from the moment I was taken out of the womb, and the nurse was like, "You should see this movie." Right. I literally thought Marlon Brando would be in every frame, and he's not at all. It's not at all how it plays out.
To keep it seasonal, it's like when you realize that Cousin Eddie he only shows up in Christmas Vacation at the 44-minute and 12-second mark. And by the way, you look it up right now. That's a real number that I don't have written down anywhere. I'm just obsessed with stuff like that. Alec Baldwin and Glengarry Glen Ross is the ultimate example. We literally won an Oscar for being in the movie for 5 minutes or whatever. But yeah, I mean, Marlon Brando is the face of this, and it's not really about him. I mean, he's the linchpin. He's the most important character because he's a linchpin. I think a lot of what you were saying about it being interpreted, whether it's tragic or whether it's, it's a great story or whatever, in a lot of ways, and please understand that I'm not comparing the two movies, although they were both made by two great directors of one off generation. That movie was sort of the original Wolf of Wall Street in the sense of the people who took it wrong ruined it for a lot of people. Because Wolf of Wall Street's a really good movie, and I didn't expect a lot of my buddies to want to become finance bros because of seeing it.
You
know what I mean?
Crazy.
Yeah, but then people wanted to be gangsters because of Godfather. Right. People wanted to be gangsters because of Scarface. And it's are we watching the same fucking movie here, guys? Because I don't think they're really glorifying it. I think they're making a good story, but that looks bad, you know?
That looks right. It looks all of that murder looks unpleasant.
I agree.
So one of the interesting things too that I think is funny for that it glamorizes the culture is that the movie is obviously based on a novel by Mario Puzo. And interestingly, so Mario, he himself was in a lot of debt when he before writing the screenplay. He was like basically had a bunch of gambling debt, and he considered himself the sort of Fredo of the family because he couldn't get anything right. He couldn't make enough money. He had 5 children. He was like in the gutter, right?
Mhm.
And he basically was took a partial kind of script idea to Paramount and was like, what do you think? Could I get $10,000, which is how much he was in debt for with gambling sharks.
Wow.
Could I get like some money for this? And then I'll keep writing it. And then, you guys will, and then maybe I'll also sell it as a book and, whatever. And Paramount was like, okay, I'll give you $10,000 against $75,000 of an ultimate script. And the guy kind of did it as like a favor, and then the executive, and then forgot. Until then Mario's like, oh, is it okay if I change the name to The Godfather? And then the guy's like, oh my God, I've completely forgot you're still writing that thing. You know what I mean? And then later on, he fucking gets a book deal or whatever. There's a bidding war for the book and all this stuff. So the book ends up being a huge bestseller. And all of these lines, I'll make him an offer they can refuse, and like a man isn't a man unless he spends time with his family, all this shit.
Leave the gun, take the cannoli.
Leave the gun, take the cannoli is an improvised line from the actor, but a bunch of the lines that we think of as iconic lines are from Mario Puzo's mom. They are not from the mafia. He had a very passing knowledge of the mafia because he was like somewhere in the neighborhood and maybe would see a guy, but he did most of this stuff was research, and he thought some of the stuff that his Italian mom said sounded mafia-like. Yeah. And so he threw it in there. And so these things that then become a part of gangster language were just Mario's mom. And I think that's hilarious.
First of all, that's hilarious, and I didn't know it, and it's fascinating. But also, I'm further upset about the lack of female dialogue.
Oh, yeah. I know.
Okay.
I was like, attribute. This should be the godmother, obviously.
This should be the godmother.
Okay.
That's where these lines are coming from. The mouth of a woman.
To be fair, just to this movie specifically,
sure,
these type of dudes didn't let women talk. I don't know what to tell you, but
that's also true.
They didn't.
True.
You know what I mean?
But cameras can go where women are.
I understand that, but it would be like, oh, why is there no non-binary representation in this medieval folklore movie? Well, they didn't. You were a knight or a princess. I don't know what to fucking tell you.
We can do our best. I mean, I do want to say, though, I feel like that argument is absolutely true.
I don't believe in what I'm saying, by the way. I'm just playing devil's advocate.
No. But I do find it frustrating when people say, why weren't there any, let's say, Iranian Americans in this movie? That's fucking stupid. And I do hate it when people say stuff like that, right? But the only time that I don't get that frustrated with that argument is literally just women. Just because women are half of the whole everything.
Of course.
So it's crazy that the female thing wasn't more involved in the story. But okay,
correct.
Listen, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to get into casting. And we are back. And guys, we really have to talk about casting because the casting of this movie is, I think, pretty great generally, but I have so much to say, and there's so much historical stuff. So talk to me first about, I'm going to start with a very small character first, just because I was like utterly shocked to see her in the movie. I didn't realize that Diane Keaton was in this movie. Danielle, were you not shocked by that?
You mean a woman who marries the next Godfather? I mean, granted, he tells her to shut the fuck up at every turn, but still.
Well, Negin, not only was I remember being in college being surprised the first time I saw this. Not only was I surprised, famously, Diane Keaton was surprised. She has been quoted as saying, this is like almost a direct quote, "What am I doing in those movies?" And the answer is not a ton. Someone took away the vast majority of her eyebrows. I suspect foul play. I don't know what's going on there. But what I will say is, I think Kay is such a lost opportunity. as a character, because I still can't tell you at the end of Godfather specifically how she feels about mob family violence. I guess not super into it maybe, but not against it enough to say no to marrying into it. No idea. And she's kind of inscrutable as a character because you just aren't given a lot for her.
No. Well, it feels like a missed opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think if I were to remake this film, Negin, which no one is asking for.
Yeah.
I think it would be called The Godmother now that I know what I know, and Kay would be the star because I'm actually think
And
it's
she
a
would ride
fascinating
around in a
story.
pumpkin and grant people wishes. I like it.
Why not? She's clearly like
think,
a visual contrast to this family.
Yeah.
But what does she think and feel?
Right, because we don't really know. And also, I was like, when she finds out, even in that first scene where he says something like, my father sent Luca Brasi to beat up somebody or whatever, and she's just sort of like, oh, and I'm like,
I know.
That's not, you know what I mean? That's
like,
not
are
the
you well?
reaction. No, exactly. I'm like, that's not the reaction. I would have 1,000 follow-up questions. Like, hold on, why is he hiring some? And then hold on, you're saying violence was involved. This doesn't.
Also,
are you?
who
Hold
the
on.
fuck
Is
can
your
beat up Luca Brasi? Jesus Christ.
Yeah, right. Good point.
And by the way, for
Exactly.
anybody out there who thinks like a female gangster, like you're talking about making the Godmother, I made a joke, but like, here's why I would see it. Anyone that thinks that doesn't work has clearly never seen, Peaky Blinders with Polly's performance that was totally believable as the
Incredible.
matriarch.
Yeah,
murder.
she's great.
Also, a lot of people haven't seen this.
She's
but
fucking terrifying for the
holy
record.
shit, dude!
Yes.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Also, a lot of people, way less people have seen this, but Batman just put out a new animated series that's heavily inspired by the '90s Batman animated series, which is the greatest animated series of all time. And in the first episode, they did a gender swap on the Penguin, which, again, I'll be honest with you,
Interesting.
as a feminist, but a flawed feminist, my initial reaction was, "Oh, God damn it!" But I checked. I was like, "Okay, Corey, just watch it. Don't be your papaw. Like, immediately, don't be your papaw. Like, watch it." It was one of the best. It was one of the best interpretations of the Penguin. It was animated, so it was insane. But like, I loved, and I'm not saying make the Penguin being a woman canon. I'm just saying I'm glad they did it because, frankly, as a mother figure, she was able to scare her sons far more than a father figure ever could. She was very scary, and also the way that she was more able to blend into society. Like, it could work. I think it would be awesome. And I mean, I don't know who you get to play it, but.
And that said, it's not like I need everything to be gender swapped or whatever.
Sure.
Like,
No,
and-
don't maybe don't remake The Godfather, but a woman can be a gangster leader in a new movie.
Yes.
Of
I mean,
course, of course.
absolutely.
And those movies exist.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, I want to dive into maybe my perhaps most controversial position about this movie, which is that of Marlon Brando. Now, my question about his performance is, was the idea, his acting idea, I just got a wisdom tooth removed and everybody needs to hear me talk through it? Was that his acting idea? Because there was a lot of jowl and jaw.
There's a famous story about this.
When you're a
And then,
home run
yes.
hitter, you swing fucking hard. All right?
Right.
And sometimes you miss the ball, but you still get a double. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I suggested to my husband that I was not a huge. Now, again, this is my most controversial, and I feel like I will get messages about this. I felt like he was in a different movie than the rest of the cast. Okay, that didn't need to put cotton balls into his mouth to deliver the performance. I feel like it was. He had some idea that like his character had been shot in the throat or whatever, and that's why his voice was crazy and blah blah blah. So like, I mean, all very interesting. And my husband, who was also an actor, was just like, nobody went for something really, he really fucking went for something.
Right.
Like, he did
Imagine
really,
him, imagine him doing it straight. Kind of. And also, I would like to say this, and it might not be true. You didn't see it till late in life, and when that happens, you've seen every car. Like, we've seen Bugs Bunny play The Godfather,
Right.
and they always
Great point.
They all make fun of that voice, and it's really fun because like even in like a movie like The French Connection, which is like heralded as one of the greatest movies of all time. When you're one of the greatest movies of all time, it means you invented tropes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if you see all the movies that were inspired by that movie before you see that movie, you go back and you go, well, this is hack. What the fuck is this? You know what I mean? And it's like, no, they're the ones, they made it.
Wait.
Oh,
This is different though.
There's a very specifically fascinating story about this. So he did use cotton balls in the audition.
Yes.
Ostensibly, what I was told was, or what I remember being told was that like he wanted to seem more animal-like and less human.
Like a bulldog. Yeah.
Right. But actually, for the film itself, he had a dentist make pieces that fit into his mouth and provided the jowls he was looking for. How do I know that? My first paying job in New York was for the Museum of the Moving Image, and I taught that object.
Get out of here.
You can go there and look at it.
How fun was that?
It was the funnest ever.
So does it look like a mouth guard? Like
it looks like a mouth guard with like low wings, right?
Oh,
because it has these elements that create the gels. And we gave tours where that would be included, but there were days where I was just walking the floor like their permanent exhibition, and I would just see a group of white men just standing around them like they had come to a religious altar.
Yeah.
That object has deep resonance.
Yeah, it is.
Right?
It is the regular white man's piss Christ. That is
That's
true.
right. It absolutely is. And listen, for what it's worth, I love that choice because I think he is in a different movie.
Yeah.
I think this character exists in a movie where his power is so absolute and his decisions so final that sense of separateness actually really works for me. I thought it was a big swing that won.
For me, I was just, I know. And again, I am the lone person in America who does not fucking get that. Like, why does everybody love this performance? It's like, it feels a little melodramatic. Like, it feels like he's in a soap opera. He's going overboard. It's like sketch comedy. Like, I don't know.
Love it.
I can't.
Do you know that he did that on cue cards?
I'm sure he did.
Oh, there's no.
He
I didn't know that.
The lines.
Yeah, he was like a bad drunk at this time or so. From what I remember about the like oral history of The Godfather and 4 or 5 podcasts I listened to about The Godfather and the series that I watched about The Godfather and a couple books I made about the making of The Godfather, is that like we all think now of like, of course they got Marlon Brando. He was the greatest actor of all time, you know, but it's like that wasn't the case. He was actually sort of taboo in Hollywood at the time. Like, don't get Brando. And also, there was a lot of people at the studio that didn't want him specifically because they were like, well, if we do that, it's a Brando movie, and we don't want it to be a Brando movie. Because it also wasn't a Pacino. This is Pacino's breakout. You know what I mean? It was
his breakout movie, and they didn't want him.
Right. We'll
get to Pacino in a second.
Yeah, James Caan was like probably by far the most famous leading man, at least at that time, the hottest, right? So if you take that out, it goes from being a James Caan movie to inarguably being a Marlon Brando movie. But as we know, it was a Marlon Brando movie that wasn't really a Marlon Brando. Anyways, he made some wild choices because he's like, I got to do something because they don't want me. And they were like, well, maybe if we get Marlon Brando, but don't let him look like Marlon Brando, that'll help. And maybe that was a choice of his. Like, hey, they don't want Marlon Brando. I won't give them Marlon Brando. You know what I mean? I'll give them this insane thing.
So you're absolutely right that he was a drunk and he was considered poisonous because a bunch of his movies prior to this moment had flopped. The man was a whopping 47 years old.
No.
Yeah,
that can't be right.
He's 47 years old shooting this movie, playing 60s, 70s, whatever.
That's very upsetting.
And he, during the audition, he put the cotton balls in his mouth and whatever, and then he put shoe polish on his hair to make himself, and his face to make himself like just look a little bit more ethnic or whatever. And the interesting thing is, he wasn't terribly interested in this movie until he heard that they were asking Sir Laurence Olivier, which would have been
a choice,
a wildly different choice.
Yeah.
And they wanted Robert Redford for Pacino's role. Imagine this movie with Olivier and Redford.
I know, a bunch of just blonde
men in spaghetti face. They would be canceled these days.
Ridiculous.
Ridiculous. So they were also considering, because they really didn't want Brando, they were also considering Burt Lancaster and Warren Beatty also for the Don Corleone role. Now
Wasn't Warren Beatty like
Lancaster-
19 at this time?
Yeah, I was about to say Lancaster works, I think, but Warren Beatty was Warren
Too
Beatty.
young.
Well,
I mean,
so the interesting thing is they wanted Warren Beatty too to direct,
right?
Because Warren Beatty had just done Bonnie and Clyde, which was a huge hit, and so this was they were like, let's get that guy. And then the stuff that happened prior to the filming of this movie was like pretty insane, and you have to really think that because the book was so big. Which is something I didn't realize that it even was based on a book. I had no idea. And so realizing though, going back and thinking, oh, this was a huge, huge book, it put a lot of pressure on the studio. So they like ended up exploring every option. Now, again, let's get back to Al Pacino. Now, Al Pacino, the studio really fought. They really didn't want him.
That's right.
They thought he was too
played it too calm.
Short.
Wasn't intimidating. All that stuff. And little did we know that that's exactly who he needed to be.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean that. I think now I have to say, can I also make another maybe unpopular? Take another unpopular position on? Oh no,
for it.
I thought Al Pacino was better than he was in any movie he shot in the 90s and later.
Aside from Heat, you're correct. Yes.
Okay, maybe not Heat. Yeah,
No.
I'll do a Heat carve out.
No, that's actually. I think you don't understand. That's actually a very popular take. Because I think so.
Okay.
Because like Pacino, once he did like maybe it was Serpico or Scarface, he all of a sudden became Pacino, and he never came back from that. But he doesn't. He doesn't do that in this. It's like I attribute it to like. If you listen to the song Dream On by Aerosmith, Steven Tyler wrote this when he was 16. He was a young guy. Obviously, they didn't record their big version until later. But at the very beginning of that song, if you're an Aerosmith fan, or if you'd only listen to a bunch of new Aerosmith and then someone goes, here, listen to this, you would not believe that was Aerosmith because he uses like a regular singing voice. And it's beautiful and powerful at the same time. Then right at the end of the song, he goes from dream on to dream on, dream on. And it's like when he did that, something clicked and he goes, fuck it, that forever. And Pacino did the same thing. And like hey, here's the thing. Aerosmith and Pacino still touring, baby. You know what I'm saying? But I don't think it's unpopular to say that Pacino as a more subtle guy is better.
And it also felt like that was the movie that Francis Ford Coppola was directing, is the one where Pacino was doing the acting. Like that felt like that's the tone he was striking for, because he really wanted, because at this point in American film history, the mafia movie, the mob movie felt overdone. Right. And so Francis Ford Coppola, who also like didn't want to direct this movie and only did it because he was out of money. There's a lot of moneylessness in the backdrop of this.
He stayed being out of money. Francis Ford Coppola, God love him. He makes a movie, spends all that money making another movie. It loses all that money. Then he's broke and he has to take some job. And then he makes that movie amazing. And then repeat cycle rents. He just did Megapolis. You know what I mean?
Oh my God, that's right.
That is the pattern.
Which a huge flop for Coppola.
Listen, I think Pacino's the most terrifying figure on screen.
Yeah, because
I think
he's not screaming at you.
It's so contained. In fact, I was thinking about Miranda Priestley, the character from The Devil Wears Prada. If you go back and watch that movie, she never raises her voice.
Yeah.
Because like
Jake the Snake
real
from
power
WWF.
and terror, is that kind of reserved, confident, clear-eyed terror.
Well, Jake the Snake.
Yeah, you make other people lean in.
Right. And just to say, like, if my memory's right, this is only Pacino's second movie.
Yeah.
His first was Panic in Needle Park from the year before, which is a phenomenal performance. Very different. It's about being addicted to drugs. But, like, the studio also didn't want to take a chance on an unknown. He was much better known on stage at this point. Right. So it's a huge risk. One of the things I keep thinking about as we're talking is like, there's a famous feud at the center of this film, which is between the legendary producer, Bob Evans, and Coppola. Oh, everyone.
And
if you were a woman near him, it just seems to happen.
Yeah.
But with Bob Evans and Coppola, they had really different visions for the project, and they were constantly fighting about how Italian it should be, who the cast should be. This is the kind of set, Negin, that you and I would find hellish. Everyone is about to be fired at any time. There's a ton of screaming between takes. And I don't know if people know this, there was years of litigation between Bob Evans and Coppola about who actually owned this movie in a sense, whose movie it was.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. It's just a nutso thing to think about making.
I think that was like, and that was back when producers had such a defined job. Like now, I'm not saying there isn't still guys like that, but nowadays it's like, who's the producer? Well, the actor wanted a credit and we had to, give it to him or whatever. But there was actually 4 or 5 people. But this is back when it was like, no, it was like kind of like one dude that was like the CEO
very
of the movie,
guy. Mm-hmm.
That's right.
And I'm pretty sure Bobby almost got fired several times doing it because, like you said, he was either trying to Italian it up or he was like, come on, baby, we got to have more Italian pops in here, chicken sandwiches, come on, shake it up, girl. And then he'd go bang someone's wife, and then
Corey, have you seen the Kids Days in the Picture about Bob Evans?
That's why
it's incredible.
I'm doing really more of an impression of his impression, but I've also listened to Robert Evans perform the Kids Days in the Picture, the audiobook, and he still talks like that, baby. I'm telling you me and Henry Kissinger, we was playing golf, and I tell you, all of a sudden the bombs were dropping.
No, he's an amazing character. I really recommend that documentary. But also, my favorite line from that documentary is, we knew that, gangster movies were out. Mm-hmm. What had we done wrong? Well, we looked at the past, and they all had, in our studio, all our gangster films had starred and been directed by Jews. So this time we thought, what about Italians?
Yeah.
It's, right. He said, we want to smell the spaghetti.
That's right, baby.
So,
get you a couple grease balls in here. We'll be rolling into cash.
You got it. So, the innovation here is that it stars the people who share some kind of lineage with the characters.
Well, I'll say
not
something
about that,
again.
Negin woke Farsad.
Let me.
Goddamn representation from Hollywood.
I have two things to say about that. First of all, the role of Michael Corleone, though it went to Pacino, again, you guys mentioned one of the people in consideration for that part was Robert Redford. Another one, Martin Sheen. Another, Ryan O'Neal. Another, David Carradine. Jack Nicholson. Warren Beatty was maybe this part and not. Sorry, Warren Beatty was this part. Makes more sense.
Jack Nicholson wouldn't have had to put the things in his cheek to play Brando.
True, he has the natural jowly jaw.
You come to me on the day of my daughter's wedding. I would love to hear that. What's your fucking problem?
Corey, can you do the whole film but just dub in?
I would love to.
Yeah,
I would.
You know what? And maybe I would have bought that character. Maybe I would have bought it with that performance. I mean, I don't know. No. And then here's the thing. Okay, so we talk about Al Pacino. All the fucking people they were thinking about for Al Pacino were not Italian, so that's hilarious. When I turn this movie on and I'm looking at this movie, I'm like, James Caan? What is this white Jewish man doing in this movie? And that's a thought that I had. That is a thought that I had the entire fucking time. I couldn't let it go, and it took me out of the scene every time. And I think he delivered an excellent performance, to be honest. I think he did great.
Oh, totally.
Right? As does everybody.
And if it makes you feel better, they killed him with 19 bullets,
Let me tell you something.
Yeah, I mean, no, it doesn't make me feel better as a pacifist, Corey. It doesn't.
Well, what distracted me in James Caan scenes mostly was the amount of shoulder hair.
Mm-hmm.
So much shoulder hair.
It's a lot of shoulder. I think of the 70s as a pro male hair time.
Oh, yeah.
It's about sort of like a bearish man covered in something. And I was really struck by that. Sometimes the light would hit it in such a way and that shoulder hair would really shine. One of the things that's so fascinating, this film, the cinematographer famously, of course, is Gordon Willis. He's the Prince of Darkness because he makes such dark, mysterious, beautiful vistas. Everyone's eyes are in shadow for a lot of this movie. So you really start to notice crazy stuff like one person's forehead, another shoulder hair, because the lighting isn't leading you to the eyes. It's a really radical choice. And the studio, of course, hated that. They thought the film was literally too dark to watch. Meanwhile, I think it's one of the brilliant choices made here.
Right. And it's funny because I think, again, watching it as an adult or not, it was made before I was born. But I think if I had seen it at that time that would have felt revolutionary.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, I've seen so many things that have been shot like that. So the cinematography didn't feel revolutionary, obviously, because but I recognized that it had set a standard.
Yes.
That it, in film history, it set a kind of new standard for how the tone of something could be communicated using lightness and darkness.
If I'm not
in that
mistaken,
way.
a lot of that was like kind of by accident because they would light it. I could be wrong and thinking about a different movie, but I don't think I am. They would light it kind of correctly for the scene, but then Brando and other people would just decide to move to different places. Like they would just be improvising and stuff.
Oh, really?
And they either didn't have the time or the money to like reset it up. And they were like, these are giving brilliant takes. You know what I mean? And finally they were like, Francis was like, it doesn't matter. Who gives a shit? I think that I'm correct in that, but I kind of think they accidentally did this in a way.
Accidentally or not, it works.
Yeah.
And there is so much improv in the movie, and some of the lines that we really think of as like, leave the gun, take the cannoli, like those things were improvised. And a lot, or like even in the scene where James Caan
beats the shit out of that guy,
inexplicable white man, he takes the camera at the wedding. He takes the camera from the extra. That extra did not know that was going to happen. So he takes the camera and then fucking, I don't know, kicks the extra whatever and throws the camera down and then throws like $20 on the ground as like, oh, sorry, I fucked up your camera. That is all something that he improvised. Tremendous. And also when he was growing up I think he grew up in Queens, in neighborhoods where there were mafia people, he would see, they're like, just general rough kind of dudes. He would see dudes like beat each other up and then throw money on the ground.
That's awesome.
And that's where he got that idea. He's like, oh yeah, if I could take and then I'll just throw some.
That's as kind as you could be as a man back in the day in New York City.
Yeah.
Like, we hadn't gotten to
we
hadn't gotten to don't beat the shit out of people for nothing yet, but we got to fuck it. Here's that.
Slight reimbursement.
Yeah.
Slight.
Yeah. I wanted to also note that a lot of the like extras and like kind of these bit parts were played by actual family members of Coppola and or gangsters, like literal gangsters. The guy playing the piano in that montage was Coppola's dad. Obviously, the baby is Coppola that was being baptized is Coppola's baby, is Sofia Coppola, famously.
What happened when they finally put a woman in charge of Godfather again? Sofia had a lot to do with that third one, didn't she? Sure did.
Again, that's a question. That is a question for another podcast, Corey.
I'm just here to be a dick.
Correct.
I'm just here to prove why you shouldn't have white male voices on anything.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
But my question, because obviously, so that movie is famously shit upon.
Yeah.
Right.
And
I've never seen it.
I think I saw it sort of vaguely, like out of the corner of my eye. And so I don't remember. And again, it requires a real rewatch for me to be like, is this the worst thing that ever happened? Or are we all being a little hyperbolic here?
Big time.
Right.
Big time hyperbolic.
It is the worst thing that's ever happened. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about with you guys is the kind of like gangster world, because I don't know if you guys know this, but the actual mafia, they had something called the Italian American Defense League, I think is what it was called. It was like a civil rights
long title. It has like 6 more words.
Yeah, exactly. It's a civil rights organization for the Italians that was headed by one of the a don of a New York family. Right. And they were basically like trying to get people to stop making gangster movies and stop using the word mafia. And they were holding things up for this movie big time until I guess it was Evans agreed to take out the word mafia.
Mm-hmm.
And
from
include
the movie.
Several of their members as extras.
That is correct. And they were mainly weren't they like mainly there to like make sure that, they stick to the fucking script,
Oh, I probably.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah.
You report back to me.
But Negin, can I just say one thing quickly? Because this is what really wowed me about the Coppola family thing. Connie is somewhat important character in this
Yes.
film. She's the wife who's beaten by her husband. Her defending her is part of the plot here.
Point one
That's
for us.
Coppola's sister. and she,
that's right. I forgot. Yeah.
and she had never acted.
Yeah.
To give that to a woman who's never, that's a bold choice.
Progressive choice, I'd say.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny too because the Johnny LaFontaine character had an actual like similar storyline to the character he was playing because
Is
the
that
mob
right?
got involved in getting his contract and
Sinatra.
getting him taken out of this and that and what there was like there's
Wow.
threats and all this crap, right?
Yeah.
And that was because
And
of
the interesting
Sinatra,
thing-
right?
And it was kind of based on Sinatra, like a combination of Sinatra
I mean,
and
like
somebody.
the reason that they tried to get him out of the movie is literally they could tell it was based on Sinatra, and that pissed Sinatra off. That's what I think happened.
Well, so there was endless shit like that where
Yes.
the mafia got involved and threatened and think
Could
so
not
they were
sleep.
so this movie was made like at every step of the way with like mafia involvement, which I think is crazy. But the funny thing about Johnny
Representation
LaFontaine,
matters.
but the interesting thing about Johnny LaFontaine was that he wasn't very good, or he was totally green as an actor. He was he was a singer at that time, and he spent most of his time in Vegas doing shows. And there was a scene where Marlon Brando like slaps him in the face. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? The
Yes.
scene where he's just
Yep.
like, "Be a man" or whatever.
Be a man, act like a man. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because he'd given
That
him
was not-
everything, and he was coming groveling back like a little
Right.
bitch,
And
Yeah.
he was crying.
Yeah.
Right.
That was improvised. He didn't know he was going to be slapped in the face, and Marlon
Oh, yeah.
Brando did it because Johnny LaFontaine wasn't a great actor.
Yeah. Dude, you have to do that in wrestling. If you're working with someone green and they don't know how to take a fake slap, you gotta fucking hit them, man. Like you got to.
Well, it totally works, right? But like, Negin, it's one of like so many examples where we as film directors think like, I'd be sued for this.
Oh yeah, you
today.
shouldn't do it.
Right? Like,
No.
I mean,
You shouldn't
that's-
do it.
That's insane. Hitting someone without telling them is absolutely nuts. But can we talk about taking out the prop horse head and replacing it with a real horse's head and
Genius.
not telling the actor?
Brilliant.
Tell who decided that? I didn't
A genius.
catch like
I
how
would
that
guess
went
Coppola.
down.
Like it's an incredible idea for performance, but you have to be in the 1970s
Yes.
to not end up in prison.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
Because
literally, where did they get that horse's head?
he called.
You need a horse's
farm
head?
in
I
New
get you a horse's head by 3 o'clock. What are you talking about?
They called Corey.
Yeah.
And Corey's a really important part of this project.
Yeah.
As a result, thank you, Corey. I believe they called a farm in New Jersey and asked were there any horses who were about to be put down, and they put the
Yeah.
horse down. They said,
Define
yeah,
I guess
about
that's
to.
what-
How
yeah,
much
that's
money
where
we
you get
talking
horse-
here?
But can you imagine this poor fucking actor? You've rehearsed this with a prop. You're just assuming that's what it's going to be, and then you look down and it's a real fucking horse's head.
Yeah.
Like I love
Yeah.
the performance, but come on, that's a lot to ask of a person on screen.
I agree, and like I do
also,
think
because I'm like, it sounds unhygienic. Sorry.
yeah, no,
just
it's unhygienic, and also like sometimes I do feel like with method acting and all these things, like sometimes you should just see if the actors can act first. Like
Right.
I remember Dustin, like all the preps Dustin Hoffman made for whatever movie I can't remember. Like it was just insane. He wasn't sleeping. He was eating terrible.
I think
and
you're
It was
talking about
Minuteman.
the running Minuteman. Yeah.
yeah.
I was gonna say
and
Running Man. Yeah.
I want-
Also, a Bob Evans production.
there you
by
go.
the way.
And I want to say I think it was Laurence Olivier, but if it's not,
Yes,
it's something
yeah,
of those guys.
it was
This is my
Olivier.
favorite. This is one of my favorite lines ever, and it applies to actors, but I think it applies to like all art forms. When he's telling him Laurence Olivier all this stuff he's doing to get ready for this role, and he goes, "My boy, have you just tried acting?" I was like, "Yeah, just do that."
Absolutely. It's so funny because we talked about this. I don't know if it was with the two of you, but with somebody on the Succession pod because Jeremy Strong turned in,
It was
an
yeah.
incredible performance,
Masterful.
right?
It's great.
Fucking fantastic. That said, I think he could have turned in that same performance without the shenanigans of,
And if you can't, then go to a mental hospital and not do it. Yeah, like imagine if I had to scream at my wife before I went on stage every night, and that's the only way I could do it. Like, I think people would tell me, like, you might not need to do comedy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and it's also funny because it's like you look at like an actor like, Kieran Culkin, who famously does not prep. Right.
Right.
And I feel like I'm 50% more like than prepping than Kieran Culkin, but like I also don't feel like over prepping serves me as an actor. Like I've never really over prepped because I do feel like it gets kind of robotic or whatever and crazy at a certain point. But like that, I like it kind of makes sense to me. You want a little freshness. You want a little who's what's it. It's not a stage performance, which needs a lot of like specific physical movement on specific physical location. Like it's different than a stage performance. You don't have like rehearsal isn't the same. It's just like not the same. And I don't know.
Well, Brando, by the way, his excuse, who knows the real reason for why he only used cue cards, was what you're describing, Negin. He didn't want to memorize it ahead of time because then it wouldn't sound fresh from him.
Right.
His method was to have the lines come at him in real time. In fact, there's scenes in this movie, apparently, where actors whose backs are facing the camera have the cue card attached to their chest. So Brando can read it off of them. That's a commitment to freshness.
That's a commitment to freshness and also a level of respect I want to get to, because I could never, if I was doing a short scene in something, I could never be like, hey, will you just put some Post-it notes on Kristen Stewart's forehead, please? That'd be great for me. But once you get to that level, man, you're a fucking made man.
Oh, totally.
I was in a TV show called Bull. Do you guys know the CBS show Bull?
Yeah,
absolutely.
And the main actor, I mean, first of all, when you're in a weekly, like 22 episodes a year, fucking, hour-long drama, and you're the lead, and you have to come up with methods, because you cannot memorize that volume all the time. And also they change the script. Like even me, they changed. I don't know if it was that show, but another one where they changed what I had to say. And I had like 20 minutes, to memorize a whole page of shit and like, and then go do it. And so it's like, you have to have methods, but that guy, he had lines written there's a mug, there's lines on it. There's like a notebook on his desk of, legal files. There's lines on it. There's like you know what I mean? Was everything had lines on it. And like, you have to sometimes you just have to do that stuff.
Totally.
I've got bullet points on my cocktail napkin when I do stand up, and I wrote the shit. I wrote it myself. You know what I mean? And nobody would ever know. It's just I was like, well, you're gonna have a napkin anyways. Like, just jot down. And honestly, I usually never look at it. Never. It's just like, but I know it's there. And I'm like,
right. The act of jotting it down. Yeah.
But like, it's huge. Yeah.
I wrote this, so if I can't remember what the fuck I wrote, then how's this guy gonna remember 22 episodes of some shit?
Yeah, Corey, when I'm doing new material on stage, it is with an outfit that has pockets in it, just so that I could hold a little piece of paper that has my, absolutely.
Yeah. Ironically, when I'm doing new material, I don't prepare at all. That's the opposite. I'm like, hey, whatever happens.
That sounds wild.
Yeah, it's fun.
Stand-up comedy is wild and inexplicable in every regard. Now, I wanted to share this other fun fact with you guys. Talk about method acting. The guy who played the brother-in-law, I forget his name, the actor, he went on a wine and popcorn diet to lose weight for the role and drank a gallon of Chablis before screen testing the scene where he beats his pregnant wife up.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa. First of all, that seems like a very unorthodox pathway toward performance. Yep. If it worked for him, great. Secondly, when it comes to that character, fuck that guy.
Yeah, he really did.
Yeah, fuck that guy.
I was so mad that after his domestic violence, had basically been the catalyst for Sonny's death, he gets a job with the family? The family's like, good, you beat our daughter and you also caused another person's death. Do you want to join? Do you want to come on in?
And would you like to know, in Henry V, he kills the king of France's son, the Dauphin, and then the king offers him his daughter's hand in marriage. It is Henry V, people.
I come back to the word dysfunctional, Corey, and I stand by it.
I agree with you. You're right.
Thank you.
I also feel like that storyline wasn't. Yeah, it felt not fleshed out for me because
Yeah.
It was totally underbaked because it felt like, oh, she's begging for help. She's being beaten. We don't actually then see the results of any of that. Like, for a second, I was like, oh, did she die in that scene? Was she just beaten to death? Like, I literally didn't know.
Same.
And then the next scene, she's fucking fine. Like, I felt like that was underdeveloped. And then part of me feels like, again, I'm watching this with 2024 eyeballs.
Right.
That this should have
great
been
vision.
a 10 episode television show
Yeah.
in the model of Prestige Cable.
Listen, The Sopranos borrows a lot
For sure.
of its
Yeah.
choices from this, and we know how well that worked.
Yeah.
You know, in
Yeah.
that structure. So I totally agree. I just can't stop myself from pointing out that I think the only cogent full sentence we hear Brando's wife's character at all in the film say
I don't
is
even can't say
is when Sonny is trying to protect his sister from being abused, and the Don's wife says, "Don't interfere."
Yeah. That
is her one line.
The Sopranos has a scene. I think it was with Richie who fucked that guy. But basically, he was talking to somebody. Oh yeah, it was like Christopher and Adriana. Christopher hit Adriana, and he's like, "Hey, that's my niece. You want to lay hands on her again? You give her your goddamn name." You know, in other words, like when you marry her, beat the shit out of. Yeah, but like, and this is his family's. But like, once a woman becomes again, Mario Puzo's inventing a lot of this, obviously, and we don't get The Sopranos without Mario Puzo inventing these things.
Stealing from his mother, right?
Yeah, in the lore of the La Cosa Nostra, no one gives a fuck what you do to your wife, even if the woman is your relative. They're like, that's a man's right to tune her up.
But what's so shocking about this film, like watching it now with my 2024 eyes, is that like so much of the plot is driven by either seemingly trying to protect women or revenge for something that's happened to a woman.
Yeah.
But women are so peripheral.
Yeah.
Right? Like that combination's kind of startling. Sonny dies because of a plot involving a woman. The first conflict we hear about is someone's daughter, the Undertaker, who's been physically and reputationally harmed by men. And so a lot of this violence is about women, but it never comes from them.
Yeah.
Like that really struck me on this watch.
As a fan of country music, it didn't affect me at all because that's how that works. Like all these guys, like every country song that's super popular is always like someone looked at my woman wrong across the bar. And so I beat him outside with a tar, but then that same guy.
And I went home and beat her.
Yeah, you're right. That same guy ignores her, doesn't let her have an opinion, tells her who's to vote for. And the dudes that listen to it, they hear it and they feel the same way. They're like, we're very protective of women. Now let's vote to take your rights away, bitch.
That's right.
So like,
that's right.
So to me, it's like, this isn't just an Italian mob thing. This is just how most, machoistic or whatever pig men do. It's like they pretend like we are here to protect women, but like only their physical bodies, not their mental well-being, not their whatever the fuck. And so
that's right. When Brando says women and children can afford to be careless but men can't, I just wanted to shout at the screen, who's murdering each other? Like women aren't murdering each other. So I actually think that they're much more careful than you are.
Yeah.
Right? They're just the excuse you use for murder a lot of the time.
Right.
Now listen, we're running out of time, and I wanted to get to one last thing, which is you guys are great. You mentioned the machoistic stuff from country music. Now, the other thing that I found fascinating was that like Italian stereotypes were sort of like, to me, the idea that an Italian is like this is a stereotype and it's not real, right? Like because it's
never mind.
Because it's been,
you never did comedy in New York, lady. Come on.
But it's so parodied over time, the stereotype, that it's like clearly a stereotype. But the interesting thing is like it really reminds me of like the stereotype of Muslims and Arab people and Iranian and Middle Eastern people in the 90s, 2000s, and 2010s.
Correct.
of just like they're violent. What's their thing? The thing they're about? Oh, the thing they're about is violence and like
And terrorism,
shitting on terrorism and shitting on women and like
Right.
creating terror and like unspeakable gore and like and
Right.
I was like, oh, that's fun. I guess it's just like there was something fun about that was just like a continuum of ethnic stereotypes. It's just like you take the same stereotype and then you throw it onto another group, and then from us it will go to this other group. You know what I mean? And so there's something sort of oddly lovely historic about that.
Let me make a point that actually is in favor of why y'all are better than the stereotype, and a lot of Italians aren't. I know that sounds horrible, but here's my point. No, let me get there. Let me get there.
Let it, yeah.
No Iranian likes being compared to a terrorist. Plenty of Italians that I've met love being compared to people in The Godfather. Like, there's no fucking Iranian or Iraqian that's like watches Three Kings and is like, yeah, that's us, baby. But like so many motherfuckers that I've met outside the stress factory wearing a goddamn wife beater being like, don't fuck with me and my family. You seen The Godfather, motherfucker? That's who we are, you know? So it's not right to do it to either. However, it's a scotch different in my opinion.
Well, I will say, and I don't know, I can't say what the average Italian thinks of this movie, but I can say that the general reaction of the mob community was favorable.
Sure.
And that as we started in the beginning of this podcast saying, it glamorized mob life in a way that invited people in, as opposed to the thing that we thought would happen, which was like, this is a cautionary tale, stay away.
Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking about this as I was watching it, because remember, this comes out in 1972. And I'm sure a ton of Italian-American families saw it when it came out.
Oh, yeah.
I guarantee you there were people, Italian-Americans in the audience of this film originally, who remembered the signs that said, no Irish, no Italians.
Absolutely.
Right? You know, we don't think of Italians as a minority group really anymore.
But they were.
They were. They fully entered whiteness now, so it's different, right? That's how the country
that's
works.
the only reason I'm saying all this shit.
Right, exactly. Because they're not currently a harmed group. They don't need a league with a lot of words in the title to protect them.
If this
was
about the triads, I would have kept my mouth shut this whole goddamn time. I can say that right now.
That's right. But I just want to point out one thing that I thought was so interesting. I know you'll be shocked, Negin, that I'm bringing it back to Judaism, unlike me. But yet, and yet, I want to just point out the two men who are like the antagonists to this family are both Jews. We have the Jewish movie producer, and then we have the Jewish casino owner in Nevada. And I think Coppola does that really purposefully because, number one, he hated Bob Evans, who was a Jew, and I often wonder if that's what's going on here. But also because I think he's talking about how for all immigrant groups that make it in this country, there is a period of vast violence against them, violence from them.
Sure.
And he's highlighting two immigrant groups here, Jews and Italians, and how violence becomes their language once they're here. Right? So it's a kind of condemnation of like what immigrants have to go to make it and the lengths we expect from them to gain power. So like, you know, I think that's really in there. And I think Coppola was very aware of anti-Italian bias. So again, like, it depends when you see it.
And again, the idea that the book was also extremely popular. Just my last little tidbit before we have to break off here is that when Al Pacino was getting his haircut to do his screen test, they took him to a barber. And they said, explain to the barber, can you give him a haircut like a college student, a serious college student? And then they start saying, oh, you know, he's going to be auditioning to play the part of Michael Corleone from the Mario Puzo book, The Godfather. And the barber had read that book, and he got so nervous and excited that the barber had a heart attack on the spot. Had a heart attack.
What?
And they had to take him to the hospital because that's how much this book had penetrated mainstream culture. So so just to say, Danielle, like there was a lot like just contextually happening of the knowledge of these tropes and themes or whatever in mainstream culture. So you're absolutely right. In the
barber survive?
You know, the funny thing is I don't know, but let's just say yes. I'm going to say yes. Yes, he survived.
Okay,
we don't need to worry about him. He's great. He has a great life.
I know. I think it's better if he didn't. I think it's better if that's the last thing. Because think about it. He died really happy. He was like, I'm cutting Michael Corleone's.
Maybe May we all be so lucky.
Dude, if someone rang my doorbell, I opened it up and it was Dolly Parton and I died, fucking, bury me beside the Gucci stove. I'm done.
Who is that not true for? If I opened the door, it was Dolly Parton,
No.
I would die.
I agree. She's universally loved.
That's right.
My Dolly Parton is Bjork, so same thing. Same thing. Folks, my last final question, and then we really, really have to sign off, is should boyfriends from the past and into the future of all time talk about this movie?
I'm going to let Corey start on that.
Should they talk about it? Absolutely. Should they do the thing that we do where we pause and don't let a woman just enjoy the film like she should enjoy the film? Absolutely not. I would say that there could be a happy medium where you watch the movie, but the girlfriend in writing has to agree to a post-movie interview. Right, a post-movie interview where you have graphs.
I'm okay
and
with
stuff.
that. Yeah,
because that way you get to enjoy the movie and we get to do our thing, but the two things aren't like we don't do this to be annoying. We do it because we fucking love you. Okay.
Okay, Danielle, that's Corey's position. Corey's position is we don't do it to be annoying. We do it because we fucking love you. Danielle,
after
should
that delivery,
boyfriends?
my position is that I'm rather scared. That was
Don't go against the family.
that was terrifying. I think it's perfectly fine for men to talk about this movie, not at people about this movie. There is a distinction, but Corey and I were talking about this a little bit in the beginning, or maybe it was Negin. Like, how about this as a contemporary twist? I'm the boyfriend here. Hey, The Godfather is such an important movie to me. I love it. I really want you to see it. How about we agree to a double header?
Love it.
Where we watch The Godfather and you pick a Sofia Coppola film.
Love it.
And then we can look at this in terms of intergenerational filmmaking, the changes in cinematic, approach. Like, there's such a rich conversation here because hilariously, even though it seems that Coppola is somewhat allergic to women speaking, his daughter is one of the great contemporary directors. And makes mostly films about women.
Right.
So, I would say, like, if a guy is going for it, that's the double header that makes it work in 2024.
I would have to explain to
All
my
right,
wife
so
who Sofia
Danielle's-
Coppola is first, but yes, I'm all about a one for you, one for me thing. Like, hey, this is important to me. Show me something important to you.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So Danielle's response is to build a film club.
Yes.
And no,
Everyone
I want to say that one of the that it was the transformation of my husband from my husband to like stereotypical dude who like fucking loves the shit out of this movie was really it was actually really cute to watch. His inability to stop himself from pressing pause. I mean, it was like just like for the spirit to have taken him over, like he was like in church speaking tongues, like that was so cute. And so I do think, like, if that's where that movie is for you, I would just do a little disclaimer at the top and be like, I'm a man, and this is how this movie courses through my veins.
Right.
I apologize in advance for what you're about to experience.
Lovely.
And then whatever movie you need to show after to even it out, I will do that.
10 things I
and
hate
so
about you.
I think
I would accept that on this, but let me make a point really clearly that I think all men should hear. She's not going to watch Serpico.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's fine.
It's a piece of shit.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
not,
I'm just telling you that right now.
Yeah.
Can't do it with every movie.
haven't seen it, so I can't. But all right, folks, that is the end of the Godfather podcast. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and I would love for the people of Fake the Nation to be able to follow the two of you and all the wonderful things they do. Danielle, where do they do that?
If you go to DanielleDurchslag.com, you can see my latest wearable project performance piece called The Sabbath Queen. And when you go, you'll see the hat is made of real challah. That's my teaser. And there's a performance I did as the Sabbath Queen recently, and that video is available on my website on the homepage.
Oh, guys, it's so fun. It's like a real, just a crazy, uplifting, wild video. So you should absolutely watch that. And
Thanks,
Corey,
man.
where do they find you?
I do all my bonus stuff over at WeLoveCorey.com. That's like my Patreon-ish type thing. But on all the socials, I'm at Corey R. Forrester. I'm enjoying Blue Sky. I'm unfortunately tethered to all of them because I'm not a big deal. But Blue Sky is very fun. So if you're one that's made the jump, go follow me over there at Corey R. Forrester. I'm on Cameo. Holidays are coming up. I do a myriad of characters that are a lot of fun. I give you a mini movie to give to your friends. You know what I'm saying?
That sounds great.
And of course, I write for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And come see me in Nashville, December 12th through the 14th. At Zany's for the well-read Christmas shows. We do it every year. They're always fun. They always sell out. Get them tickets now.
Folks, do all of those things. Like I said, one of life's treats is to see Corey on a stage live.
Absolutely.
And as for me, you know where to find me and all the things that I do. I'll be on an upcoming episode of Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. I'll be my next column is coming out in the Progressive. Just stuff and things, and and so you can find me on all of the socials that you should also be deleting.
Yes.
And I want to thank everyone who makes this podcast a possibility. That's our wonderful producer, Andrew McGuire. Thanks to Gaby for our theme music. Thanks to everyone at HeadGum for making it happen. If you have any questions or concerns or thoughts or ideas, you can email us at fakethenationpodcast@gmail.com. And otherwise, you will have the regular episode of this podcast in your earballs next time.
That was a HeadGum podcast.